Blood pooled beneath Dr. Isabella Rodriguez as Officer Derek Morrison stood over her, his baton still raised from the final blow. 2 miles away, Master Chief Antonio Rodriguez was reviewing security protocols with corporate executives when his phone rang with the call that would shatter his carefully constructed civilian life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before we dive into this shocking story of institutional corruption meeting military precision, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and join our community fighting for justice and accountability. This story will show you how one devoted husband used his specialized training to dismantle a corrupt system from the inside, proving that sometimes the only way to fight institutional power is with equal organization and unwavering discipline. Tony Rodriguez had always been methodical. During his 25-year Navy SEAL career, he had learned that emotions could cloud judgment, that strategic thinking saved lives, and that preparation was the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, the 47-year-old security consultant was conducting a routine vulnerability assessment for Meridian Technologies, his calm demeanor and precise observations earning nods of approval from the corporate safety team. His secure phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Tony's military instincts immediately went on alert. Isabella never called from unknown numbers, and she knew his schedule. When he answered, his wife's voice came through shaky and barely recognizable. "Tony," she whispered, pain evident in every syllable. "I'm at Mercy General Hospital. I need you to come now. The police, they hurt me." The corporate executives around the conference table noticed the subtle change in Tony's posture, shoulders squaring, jaw tightening, eyes becoming laser-focused. Without excusing himself, he gathered his materials with mechanical precision and headed for the door. "Emergency," he said simply to the confused executives. "We'll reschedule." 20 minutes later, Tony strode through the emergency department doors of Mercy General Hospital, his civilian clothes unable to disguise the bearing of a man accustomed to command. He found Isabella in Trauma Bay 3, her dark hair matted with blood, her left eye swollen shut, and her medical ID badge twisted and damaged from the assault. Despite her injuries, she was dictating notes to a nurse about her own treatment, her voice steady but strained. "Izzy," Tony said softly, his controlled voice betraying none of the volcanic rage building inside him. Isabella looked up, and Tony saw something in her uninjured eye that he had never seen before, not just pain, but a violation of her very sense of safety in the world. His wife, who had treated gunshot victims without flinching, who had remained calm during natural disasters, who had faced down racist comments in medical conferences with quiet dignity, looked fundamentally shaken. "He pulled me over for a broken taillight," Isabella began, her words carefully measured. "Officer Morrison, badge number 4739. I was completely compliant, Tony. Hands visible, spoke respectfully, explained that I was a doctor returning from a house call. When I reached for my medical bag to show him my ID, he said I was resisting arrest. Then he dragged me from the car and started hitting me with his baton." Tony's hands remained steady as he gently examined her injuries, his medic training from special operations automatically cataloging the damage. Concussion, possible fractured ribs, extensive bruising consistent with baton strikes. But it was the deliberate nature of the assault that sent cold fury through his system. This wasn't random violence, but calculated brutality designed to intimidate and humiliate. "There's more," Isabella continued, gripping his hand. "A teenager filmed it. Morrison didn't see him, and there was another officer there, a young woman who looked horrified but didn't intervene." Before Tony could respond, Rosa Martinez burst through the privacy curtain, her nurse's scrubs still damp with tears. Isabella's sister had received the call from the hospital and had driven straight from her shift at the pediatric ward. "This isn't the first time," Rosa said immediately, her voice shaking with anger. "Morrison beat up Maria Santos's cousin last year. Same MO, same lies about resisting arrest. The family tried to file complaints, but they disappeared into the system. Internal Affairs said there wasn't enough evidence." Tony absorbed this information with the methodical precision of a mission briefing. Multiple victims, systematic cover-ups, institutional protection. This wasn't one bad officer. This was a pattern enabled by the entire department structure. "I'm going to the scene," Tony announced, his voice carrying the authority of command. "Rosa, stay with Isabella. Document everything. Photos, witness statements, medical records. Everything." Isabella grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. "Tony, be careful. Don't do anything that will make this worse." He looked down at his wife, brilliant, compassionate, dedicated to healing, lying broken in a hospital bed because a corrupt officer believed his badge made him untouchable. Tony's face remained impassive, but Isabella had been married to him long enough to recognize the controlled intensity that meant he was shifting into operational mode. "I won't make it worse," he said quietly. "I'm going to make it right." Tony drove to Oakwood Park, where Morrison's assault had taken place 3 hours earlier. The scene had been cleared, but Tony's trained eye immediately began reconstructing the incident. Skid marks showed where Isabella had pulled over properly. Bloodstains on the asphalt marked where she had fallen. Broken glass from her medical bag glittered in the afternoon sun. "Excuse me, sir," a young voice called out. Tony turned to see an Asian teenager, maybe 16, approaching nervously with the phone clutched in his hands. The kid looked terrified, but determined. "Are you Dr. Rodriguez's husband? I saw the ambulance and someone said it was a doctor who got hurt." "I'm Tony Rodriguez. You are?" "Aiden Park. I filmed what happened, the whole thing. I was walking my dog and I saw the police car pull her over, and something seemed wrong, so I started recording." Aiden's words tumbled out rapidly. "Sir, that officer is lying. Your wife didn't resist anything. She was completely calm and respectful, and he just started hitting her." Tony studied the teenager, recognizing the courage it took to approach him. "Show me." The video was even worse than Isabella's description. Morrison's aggression was immediate and escalating, his racial slurs clearly audible as he dragged her from the vehicle. The systematic nature of the beating, the way he positioned himself to block dashcam angles, the casual cruelty, all of it spoke to practiced brutality. "Mr. Park," Tony said when the video ended, "you may have just saved my wife's life by recording this, but you need to understand, this makes you a target. Are you prepared for that?" Aiden straightened his shoulders, and Tony saw something familiar in the teenager's expression, the moment when a person decides to do what's right, regardless of personal cost. "Yes, sir. My parents didn't immigrate here so I could watch injustice happen and do nothing." Tony pulled out his phone and began typing coded messages, innocuous texts about meeting for coffee or discussing investment opportunities. But to the recipients, former military personnel scattered across the country, the messages carried a different meaning entirely. Protocol Phoenix was active. The network Tony had built over decades of service, hoping never to use it, was now operational. As the sun set over Oakwood Park, Tony Rodriguez made a decision that would transform him from civilian security consultant back into the strategic operative he had once been. The difference was that this time, the mission was personal. This time, he was fighting for the woman he loved against a system designed to protect those who abused their power. Morrison and his enablers had no idea what they had just awakened. Within 18 hours of Isabella's assault, Tony Rodriguez's dining room had been transformed into something that looked like a military command center. Maps covered the walls, laptops hummed with encrypted communications, and 6 individuals with distinctly military bearing had materialized as if from nowhere.
Each arrival had been carefully staggered, each entry route planned to avoid surveillance, each team member bringing skills honed in some of the most dangerous operations in the world. Captain James Washington arrived first, his Marine Force recon background evident in the way he immediately began assessing sightlines and escape routes from Tony's suburban home. At 43, Hawk remained as physically imposing as during his active duty years, but it was his organizational brilliance that made him invaluable. Tony had saved his life during a hostage rescue operation in Somalia 15 years ago, creating a bond that transcended normal friendship. Intel package, Washington asked without preamble, settling into the mission mindset that had kept them both alive through countless operations. Officer Derek Morrison, Badge 4739, Metro PD. Systematic brutality, institutional protection, multiple victims. My wife is the latest, but she won't be the last unless we stop this. Washington studied the information with professional detachment, though Tony caught the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated personal investment. Hawk's younger brother had been killed by police in Detroit 8 years ago, a case that was ruled justified, despite witness testimony to the contrary. What's the operational scope? Tony replied, complete exposure and accountability through legal channels. We're not vigilantes, Hawk. We're precision instruments of justice. The second arrival was Sergeant Lisa Chen, whose slight frame and quiet demeanor concealed one of the most formidable cyber warfare specialists in the world. During their Army intelligence days, Chen had single-handedly dismantled a terrorist network's communication system, saving hundreds of lives. Now she worked in private cybersecurity, but her skills had only grown more sophisticated. I need a secure workspace, Chen announced, already unpacking equipment that looked like it belonged in a government facility rather than a suburban home. Tony led her to his home office, which she immediately began transforming into a digital fortress. Within minutes, multiple screens displayed cascading data streams, and the quiet hum of high-powered processors filled the room. Primary target is Morrison, Tony explained, but I want complete profiles on his chain of command, his partners, anyone who's enabled or protected him. Chen's fingers flew across multiple keyboards simultaneously. Already started preliminary scans during the flight. Morrison's digital footprint is extensive and sloppy. He's going to regret leaving so many electronic breadcrumbs.
While Chen established her cyber operations, Tony received attorney Carmen Valdez at the front door. At 38, Valdez had built a reputation as one of the most formidable civil rights lawyers in the country, with a particular expertise in police misconduct cases. Her parents had brought her from Guatemala as a child, and she had spent her career fighting the institutional discrimination they had faced. Dr. Rodriguez is lucky to be alive, Valdez said after reviewing the medical reports in Aiden's video. This wasn't excessive force. This was attempted murder with a badge. But I need to warn you, Mr. Rodriguez, the system will close ranks around Morrison. We're not just fighting one bad cop. We're fighting an entire apparatus designed to protect officers regardless of their actions. Tony nodded grimly. That's why we're approaching this strategically. Multiple pressure points, coordinated timing, overwhelming evidence that makes protection impossible. Valdez smiled with the intensity of a predator scenting prey. Then let's destroy them legally. While Tony's team assembled, across town, Captain Rick Sullivan was implementing the police department's standard damage control protocol. Sullivan had perfected the art of protecting bad officers over 3 decades of service, turning cover-ups into a refined science. Santos, Sullivan barked at Officer Maria Santos as she entered his office. I've reviewed your preliminary report about the Rodriguez incident. You need to revise it. Santos, 26 years old and still believing in the justice system she had sworn to serve, looked confused. Sir, I reported exactly what I witnessed. Officer Morrison used excessive force against a compliant suspect. Sullivan's expression hardened. What you witnessed was a subject resisting arrest and Morrison responding appropriately to a perceived threat. The woman was reaching into her vehicle for an unknown object, potentially a weapon. Captain, that's not what happened, protested Santos. She was reaching for her medical bag to show identification. She announced her actions clearly, and Morrison struck her before she could produce anything. Sullivan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Officer Santos, you have a bright future ahead of you. Don't throw it away by siding with cop haters over a fellow officer. Morrison has 15 years of service and commendations. This woman is probably looking for a payday, and her husband is some kind of military hotshot who thinks he can intimidate the department." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Santos felt her stomach clench as she realized what was happening. This wasn't about truth or justice. This was about protecting the department's reputation, regardless of facts. "What exactly are you asking me to do, sir?" "Revise your report. Emphasize the suspect's non-compliance and Morrison's reasonable response to a potentially dangerous situation. Standard language, you've seen it before." Santos stared at the report in her hands, knowing that her signature would either launch her career or destroy it. But as she remembered Dr. Rodriguez's broken body and Morrison's casual brutality, her decision crystallized. "I need some time to think about this, Captain." Sullivan's smile was cold and calculating. "You have until tomorrow morning, Santos. Don't disappoint me." Meanwhile, Detective Marcus Thompson was discovering that his assignment to investigate Morrison's use of force came with unexpected restrictions. Thompson, a 20-year veteran with an impeccable record, had handled dozens of officer-involved incident investigations, but this case felt different from the moment he walked into Captain Sullivan's office. "This is a sensitive matter," Sullivan had explained. "The suspect's husband has military connections, possibly intelligence community. There may be attempts to pressure or intimidate our investigation. I want you to be very careful about outside influences." Translation: don't dig too deep and don't find anything that contradicts the official narrative. But Thompson had seen the video that was beginning to circulate on social media, and what he watched contradicted everything in Morrison's official report. The detective found himself facing the same choice that had confronted countless officers before him: protect the department or pursue the truth. As evening approached, Tony's command center hummed with activity. Chen had already penetrated Morrison's social media accounts, uncovering a treasure trove of racist posts and connections to extremist groups. Washington had established surveillance protocols around key locations, mapping the daily patterns of everyone involved in the cover-up. "Morrison is at O'Malley's pub," Washington reported, monitoring a tracking device discreetly placed on the officer's personal vehicle. "Third night in a row. Either he's developing a drinking problem or meeting someone regularly." Tony studied the surveillance photos Washington had captured. Morrison sat at a corner table with two other men, one in a police union jacket, the other in an expensive suit that suggested legal representation. "They're already strategizing, which means they know this case is different." Chen looked up from her screens, a rare smile crossing her face. "It's about to get much more different. I found financial records showing Morrison received $50,000 in consulting fees from a company that doesn't exist. Want to guess who else received payments from the same phantom corporation?" She displayed bank records showing similar payments to Captain Sullivan and two other officers. "Corruption network," Washington concluded. "This isn't just about police brutality. This is organized criminal activity with badges." Tony felt the familiar clarity that came with mission focus settling over him. The scope was larger than they had initially assessed, but that also created more pressure points to exploit. A single bad officer could be protected by institutional loyalty. A criminal conspiracy would eventually devour its own members to save themselves. "Phase run complete," Tony announced to his team. "We have the players, the evidence, and the strategy. Tomorrow, we begin applying pressure." As his operatives settled in for the night, Tony climbed the stairs to check on Isabella, who was resting fitfully in their bedroom. Her face remained swollen and discolored, but her eyes showed the same determination that had made her an exceptional emergency physician. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly. "Worse than one officer having a bad day," Tony replied honestly. "Better than facing it alone." Isabella reached for his hand. "Promise me something, Tony. Promise me that when this is over, the system will be better for the next woman who gets pulled over." Tony squeezed her hand gently, thinking of the precision operation taking shape in the rooms below. I promise you that Officer Morrison and everyone who protected him will face consequences they never imagined possible. The war for justice was about to begin, and both sides were finally ready. The soft blue glow of multiple monitors illuminated Lisa Chen's face as her fingers flew across keyboards with the precision of a concert pianist. 48 hours into her digital infiltration of the Metro Police Department's systems, Chen had uncovered enough evidence to end careers and launch federal investigations. But she was just getting started. Morrison's been busy, Chen announced as Tony and Washington gathered around her workstation at 0600 hours. Coffee steamed in military-issue mugs as Chen displayed her findings across 3 large monitors. Morrison's deleted social media posts go back 7 years and include direct communication with white supremacist groups, detailed discussions about teaching minorities their place, and coordination with other officers who share his views. The evidence was damning beyond anything Tony had anticipated. Screenshots showed Morrison sharing tactical information about avoiding internal affairs investigations, bragging about previous assaults that had been covered up, and discussing strategies for targeting specific minority communities. This post is from 3 days before he attacked Isabella, Chen continued, highlighting a Facebook message to a private group called Thin Blue Truth. Morrison had written, "Time to remind these people that some neighborhoods aren't for them. Professional courtesy expected from colleagues who understand the real mission." Washington leaned closer to the screen, his expression darkening. He's not just a racist cop, he's organizing other racist cops. This is conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. Gets better, Chen said with grim satisfaction. Morrison's financial records show payments from something called Metro Security Consulting, a shell company that traces back to Captain Sullivan. But here's where it gets interesting. She pulled up a complex flowchart showing money movement between accounts. Sullivan's been receiving cash from drug dealers in exchange for tip-offs about raids and investigations. Morrison and 3 other officers were getting cuts for keeping quiet. The scope of corruption was staggering, but Tony recognized an opportunity. Criminal conspiracies created pressure points that could be exploited to turn conspirators against each other. What about Morrison's current behavior? Chen asked. She switched to real-time surveillance feeds she had established through the officer's compromised devices. Paranoid and escalating, he knows something's wrong. Look at his search history from last night. The browser data showed Morrison researching Tony's military background, looking up information about Navy SEAL capabilities, and reading articles about previous cases where veterans had pursued justice against corrupt officers. He's scared, Washington observed. Good. Scared people make mistakes. As if summoned by their conversation, Chen's monitoring system chimed with an alert. Morrison's phone was receiving a call from Captain Sullivan. Live audio intercept, Chen explained, routing the conversation through speakers. Completely legal since Morrison's phone is part of an ongoing criminal investigation we're documenting for federal authorities. Sullivan's voice came through clearly. "Morrison, we have a problem. Rodriguez's husband isn't just some angry vet. He's got resources, connections, people watching us. Internal Affairs is asking questions I don't like." Morrison's reply revealed the panic Chen had detected in his digital behavior. "What kind of resources? I thought we had this contained." "The kind that can ruin careers and end lives," Sullivan snapped. "I'm hearing rumors about federal interest, FBI Civil Rights Division. Someone's been feeding them information, and it's not coming from our usual leaks." Tony smiled grimly as he listened to the recorded conversation. The psychological pressure was working exactly as intended, creating uncertainty and paranoia within the corruption network. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Morrison continued on the recording. "Make this go away permanently." "How do you suggest we do that?" Sullivan asked. Morrison's response sent a chill through the room. "Rodriguez is a doctor. Doctors have accidents. Car accidents, medical emergencies, equipment malfunctions. Happens all the time." Washington's hand moved instinctively toward his concealed weapon. "He's threatening Isabella directly."
Tony's expression remained calm, but his voice carried lethal intensity. "Record everything. We're going to need this for the federal prosecutors." Chen had already begun capturing and encrypting the audio files. Done, and I've got something else you need to see. She displayed Morrison's text message history from the previous evening. He had been communicating with someone listed in his contacts as Tank Support. Tank is Morrison's nickname from his military washout days. Tank Support is Officer Brad Kowalski, badge 4921. Look at their conversation. The text exchange revealed plans for what Morrison euphemistically called problem resolution. Kowalski had agreed to provide backup for an operation targeting the Rodriguez situation, scheduled for that evening. "They're planning to kill my wife," Tony said with deadly calm. Washington was already reaching for his phone. "I'm activating protective surveillance on Isabella immediately. Full perimeter, rotating teams." "Wait," Tony said, his strategic mind processing the implications. "This is actually an opportunity. We let them come, but we control the environment. Film everything, document the attempted murder conspiracy, and use it to destroy their entire network." Chen looked up from her monitors with concern. "Tony, that's using Isabella as bait. The risk." "The risk is managed. They're planning this for tonight, which gives us 12 hours to prepare. Isabella will be in a controlled environment with our people providing security. When Morrison and Kowalski attempt to carry out their plan, we document everything and provide federal prosecutors with attempted murder charges to add to civil rights violations." Washington nodded slowly, recognizing the tactical brilliance of the approach. "We turn their desperation into evidence that destroys any chance of departmental protection." "Exactly. Chen, I need you to monitor all communications between Morrison, Sullivan, and their network. Track their movements, document their planning, and be ready to provide real-time intelligence to our security team." As Chen returned to her keyboards, Tony's phone buzzed with a call from attorney Carmen Valdez. "We have a problem," Valdez announced without preamble. "Federal prosecutors are interested, but they want ironclad evidence before moving forward. Local DA is already making noises about insufficient evidence for charges." "How ironclad?" "Video evidence of planning conspiracy to commit violence under color of law, financial records proving systematic corruption, and witness testimony from inside the department." Tony smiled as he looked around his makeshift command center. "Carmen, by tomorrow morning, you're going to have enough evidence to prosecute a RICO case against half the Metro PD leadership." "What are you planning, Tony?" "Justice, counselor. Pure, methodical, overwhelming justice." After ending the call, Tony turned to his team. The evidence Chen had gathered was extensive, but Morrison's planned escalation would provide the final pieces needed to destroy the corruption network completely. The digital warfare phase was complete. Tomorrow would bring the end game. Carmen Valdez's law office hummed with activity as she filed the most comprehensive civil rights lawsuit in the city's history. The 30-page complaint named Morrison, Sullivan, Chief Hayes, the police union, and the city itself as defendants, seeking damages that would cripple the department's budget for years. "We're going nuclear," Valdez explained to Tony over secure video conference. "Federal civil rights violations, conspiracy under color of law, municipal liability for inadequate training and supervision. The financial exposure alone will force the city to abandon Morrison." Meanwhile, Captain Washington's surveillance teams reported disturbing developments. Sullivan had met with police union lawyers at an upscale restaurant. Their conversation revealed the department's standard playbook for protecting bad officers. "They're calling it the Rodriguez problem," Washington reported from his observation post. Union attorneys suggested transferring Morrison to another precinct and promoting him to sergeant to demonstrate department confidence. Tony felt his jaw clench. The system's automatic protection of corrupt officers remained as strong as ever. But that protection was about to encounter pressure it had never faced before. At Metro PD headquarters, official Maria Santos stared at the revised incident report Captain Sullivan had demanded she sign. The document transformed Morrison's unprovoked assault into justified use of force against a non-compliant suspect who posed a potential threat. Every detail contradicted what Santos had witnessed.
Her phone buzzed with a text from her academy classmate. "Heard you witnessed the Rodriguez thing. Word is you better play ball or find a new career." Santos closed her eyes, remembering Dr. Rodriguez's broken body and Morrison's casual brutality. She thought about her mother, who had sacrificed everything to give her daughter opportunities in America. Would her mother want her to sign a lie to protect her career? The answer came with crystal clarity. Santos walked to Captain Sullivan's office and placed the unsigned report on his desk. "Sir, I can't sign this. It's not what happened." Sullivan's face darkened. "Officer Santos, you're making a career-ending mistake." "Maybe," Santos replied, surprised by her own calm. "But I'd rather end my career than my integrity." As she left Sullivan's office, Santos pulled out her personal phone and dialed the number on Attorney Valdez's business card. Detective Marcus Thompson faced his own moment of truth when he discovered that evidence from the Rodriguez case was being systematically buried. Morrison's body camera footage had mysteriously corrupted, witness statements were being lost in paperwork shuffles, and his requests for additional investigation resources were denied. "Thompson," Chief Hayes called him into his office. "I understand you're having concerns about the Rodriguez investigation." Thompson chose his words carefully. "Chief, there are inconsistencies between the official narrative and the evidence I've gathered." Hayes leaned back in his chair, studying the detective. "Marcus, you've had a distinguished career. 20 years of service, excellent closure rate, respected by your peers. Don't throw that away by chasing conspiracy theories." "What if they're not theories, Chief?" The silence stretched between them before Hayes responded. "Then you need to ask yourself whether pursuing theoretical justice is worth destroying real careers of good officers who've served this community faithfully." Thompson left the chief's office, understanding that his investigation would receive no departmental support. But 20 years of police work had taught him that sometimes justice required operating outside official channels. That evening, Thompson made an encrypted call to a number Attorney Valdez had provided. "This is Detective Thompson, Metro PD. I have information about systematic evidence tampering in the Rodriguez case." By midnight, Tony's command center had received intelligence that transformed their tactical approach. Santos's testimony about Morrison's assault, combined with Thompson's evidence of departmental cover-up, provided the federal nexus needed for FBI involvement. "The pressure is working," Chen reported from her monitoring station. "Sullivan's phone calls show increasing desperation. He's trying to contact retired officers who handled previous cover-ups, looking for guidance on managing federal attention." Washington updated the surveillance reports. "Morrison's behavior is increasingly erratic. He's drinking heavily, missing shifts, and making threatening posts on social media about enemies within the department." Tony studied the intelligence summaries, recognizing the signs of a conspiracy beginning to fracture under pressure. Individual members would soon start making calculations about self-preservation versus group loyalty. "Carmen, what's our timeline for federal intervention?" Tony asked during their evening briefing. "FBI Civil Rights Division is reviewing our evidence package," Valdez replied. "Agent Sarah Mitchell indicated they're prepared to move quickly if we can provide direct evidence of ongoing criminal activity." Tony smiled grimly. Morrison's planned assault on Isabella would provide exactly that evidence. "Tomorrow we end this," Tony announced to his team. "Morrison thinks he's eliminating a threat. Instead, he's going to provide federal prosecutors with attempted murder charges to add to civil rights violations." As his operatives prepared for the final phase, Tony reflected on how quickly institutional protection could crumble when faced with organized, sustained pressure. Morrison and Sullivan had operated with impunity for years because they had never encountered resistance equal to their own resources and training. That was about to change permanently. Chief Robert Hayes stood before a wall of television cameras, his dress uniform crisp and his expression carefully composed. The media firestorm surrounding Morrison's assault on Dr. Rodriguez had reached national attention, forcing the department into damage control mode. "The Metro Police Department takes all allegations of misconduct seriously," Hayes announced to the assembled reporters. "Officer Morrison has been placed on administrative leave pending a thorough investigation. We are committed to transparency and accountability." The carefully rehearsed words felt hollow even as Hayes spoke them. Behind the scenes, the department's real response was far different from the public statements. Captain Sullivan sat in the police union headquarters with Gregory Mason, the union's lead attorney, crafting a counter-narrative designed to destroy Isabella's credibility. "Dr. Rodriguez has a history of filing complaints against authority figures," Mason explained, reading from a fabricated dossier. "During her residency, she accused 2 supervising physicians of discrimination. Her medical license was temporarily suspended for prescribing irregularities. The lies were sophisticated and difficult to immediately disprove, exactly the kind of character assassination the union had perfected over decades of protecting bad officers. We leak this to friendly media outlets. Meanwhile, we suggest that her husband's military background indicates possible PTSD issues that might make him prone to violence and conspiracy theories." The union's strategy was systematic character destruction, designed to shift public attention from Morrison's actions to questions about their accuser's credibility.
Morrison himself received the full protection treatment. Within hours of Isabella's assault, he had been provided with one of the union's top criminal defense attorneys, moved to administrative duties with full pay, and coached on media statements. "You felt threatened," Attorney David Stern explained during their strategy session. "Dr. Rodriguez was reaching into her vehicle for an unknown object. Your training required you to neutralize the potential threat to protect yourself and the public." Morrison nodded. Though privately, he struggled with anxiety that was growing worse each day. The certainty that had always protected him, that the badge made him untouchable, was beginning to crack under pressure. Tony's team monitored these defensive measures through Chen's digital surveillance network. Every conversation, every strategy session, every lie was documented and preserved for federal prosecutors. "They're following the standard playbook," Chen reported during the evening briefing. "Character assassination, procedural delays, media manipulation, and witness intimidation." The institutional response escalated when anonymous threats began appearing against Isabella's medical practice. Fake online reviews accused her of malpractice, medical board complaints were filed alleging professional misconduct, and patients began receiving calls suggesting their doctor was under investigation for criminal activity. Isabella faced these attacks with the same resilience she had shown during her assault. "They're trying to destroy my life's work," she told Tony after receiving her 3rd threatening phone call that day. 20 years of helping people, and they want to erase it to protect one corrupt officer? Tony's protective instincts flared, but he channeled his anger into strategic planning. Every attack they make creates more evidence of conspiracy and witness intimidation. They're handing us federal crimes. The harassment campaign backfired when several of Isabella's patients publicly defended her character. Dr. Maria Santos, no relation to Officer Santos, spoke to local news about Isabella's dedication during the COVID pandemic. Emergency room colleagues organized a press conference supporting her integrity. "Dr. Rodriguez is one of the finest physicians I've ever worked with," declared Dr. James Kim, the hospital's chief of surgery. "These attacks on her character are transparent attempts to silence a victim of police brutality." Meanwhile, Officer Santos found herself facing retaliation for refusing to sign the false report. Her locker was vandalized, Her patrol assignments were changed to dangerous neighborhoods without backup, and supervisors began writing her up for minor infractions that had previously been ignored. Classic intimidation tactics, Detective Thompson observed, when Santos contacted him about the harassment. They did the same thing to me after I questioned evidence handling in the Henderson case 3 years ago. Santos realized she wasn't alone in facing departmental retaliation for questioning official narratives. Thompson introduced her to 4 other officers who had been marginalized for refusing to participate in cover-ups. "There's more of us than you think," Thompson explained. "We've just been isolated and divided. Maybe it's time to stand together." The conversation led to a secret meeting at Thompson's home where 5 Metro PD officers discussed their experiences with corruption and retaliation. Each had witnessed misconduct, each had faced consequences for reporting it, and each had been silenced by fear of career destruction. "If we testify together," Santos suggested, "they can't retaliate against all of us simultaneously." Thompson nodded. "Federal protection exists for law enforcement whistleblowers. We just need someone to connect us with the right authorities." That connection came through Attorney Valdez, who recognized the unprecedented opportunity. Multiple officers willing to testify about systematic corruption would destroy any remaining departmental credibility. By week's end, the institutional response had achieved the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of silencing Isabella and Tony, the harassment had generated sympathy and additional witnesses. Instead of isolating Officer Santos, the retaliation had created a coalition of reform-minded officers ready to expose departmental corruption. Chief Hayes watched his department's reputation crumble in real time, knowing that traditional damage control methods were failing against an opponent who understood both military strategy and federal law. The system that had protected corrupt officers for decades was about to face its greatest test, and Tony Rodriguez was just getting started. Officer Maria Santos walked into the FBI field office at 8 a.m. sharp, her official testimony folder clutched against her chest like armor. Agent Sarah Mitchell, a veteran of civil rights investigations, immediately recognized the significance of Santos's decision to come forward. "Officer Santos, I want you to understand that federal witness protection extends to law enforcement officers who testify about civil rights violations. Your career and personal safety are our responsibility now." Santos nodded, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "Agent Mitchell, what I witnessed wasn't just excessive force. Officer Morrison told me afterwards that Dr. Rodriguez needed to learn her place and that people like her don't belong in good neighborhoods. Captain Sullivan later told me to revise my report to support Morrison's version of events." The testimony was explosive. Santos provided detailed accounts of Morrison's racial attitudes, Sullivan's cover-up instructions, and the department's systematic retaliation against officers who questioned misconduct. "There are others," Santos continued. "Detective Thompson has evidence of evidence tampering. Officers Williams and Chen have witnessed similar incidents that were buried through inner affairs."
Agent Mitchell felt the familiar electricity of a case breaking wide open. Multiple law enforcement witnesses were the holy grail of federal civil rights prosecutions, nearly impossible for defense attorneys to discredit. Across town, Lisa Chen's monitoring systems detected panic in Morrison's communications. His text messages revealed a man losing control as federal attention intensified. "They're going to arrest me," Morrison texted to Sullivan. "Your promises about protection aren't worth anything if the feds get involved." Sullivan's response showed his own desperation. "Stay calm. The union lawyers are handling everything. Don't do anything stupid." But Morrison was already planning something very stupid indeed. Chen alerted Tony immediately when Morrison's internet searches revealed purchases of surveillance equipment, untraceable cell phones, and research into Isabella's daily routine at the hospital. "He's escalating to direct action," Chen reported during an emergency briefing. The psychological pressure is working too well. He's becoming unpredictable. Tony studied Morrison's behavioral pattern analysis that Chen had compiled. He's not just losing control, he's preparing for violence. What's his current location? O'Malley's pub, third consecutive night. He's meeting with the same two individuals, Officer Kowalski and someone we've identified as Marcus Webb, a private investigator with connections to the police union. Chen enhanced the audio surveillance from Morrison's compromised phone, revealing a conversation that sent chills through Tony's team. Rodriguez needs to have an accident, something that looks natural, medical emergency, car crash, home invasion gone wrong. Webb's response was coldly professional. That kind of problem resolution costs extra, $50,000, half up front. Tony felt ice in his veins as he listened to his wife's murder being planned with business-like efficiency. But his strategic mind immediately recognized the opportunity. Morrison was providing evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. We let it proceed to the point where we have undeniable evidence of criminal intent. Then we document everything and hand federal prosecutors a complete case. Washington looked concerned. Tony, that puts Isabella at real risk. Isabella will be in a controlled environment with full security, but Morrison doesn't know that. He thinks he's hunting a vulnerable target. Instead, he's walking into a trap. The plan required precise coordination. Isabella would maintain her normal hospital schedule, but Tony's team would establish layered security around her that Morrison couldn't detect. When he made his move, every moment would be filmed and documented. That evening, Morrison's behavior at the hospital confirmed Chen's intelligence. Security cameras captured him conducting surveillance, timing Isabella's movements, and identifying potential attack opportunities. He's casing the building, Washington reported from his concealed position. This isn't paranoid speculation anymore. This is active threat assessment. The federal investigation gained additional momentum when Detective Thompson provided Agent Mitchell with evidence of systematic evidence tampering in multiple cases involving Morrison and other officers. Internal affairs has been compromised for years. Evidence disappears, witness statements are altered, and investigators are reassigned when they get too close to truth. Thompson's files contained photocopies of original reports alongside their officially altered versions, creating a paper trail of obstruction that federal prosecutors could easily follow. Agent Mitchell assembled her team for a late-night strategy session. We have multiple federal crimes, civil rights violations, conspiracy, witness tampering, and now credible evidence of planned violence. I'm recommending immediate arrests. But Tony requested a delay through Attorney Valdez. 24 hours more. Let Morrison commit to his course of action completely. When federal agents arrest him tomorrow night, they'll have attempted murder charges to add to everything else. The psychological pressure had achieved exactly what Tony intended. Morrison's desperation was providing the evidence needed to destroy the entire corruption network. As midnight approached, Santos received word that 4 additional officers had contacted the FBI expressing willingness to testify about departmental corruption. The conspiracy of silence that had protected bad officers for decades was finally cracking under sustained pressure. Morrison, unaware that his every move was being monitored and documented, finalized his plans for Isabella's murder. He had no idea that his target was protected by some of the most elite military operatives in the world, or that his conspiracy was providing federal prosecutors with evidence to dismantle systemic police corruption. The breaking point had arrived, and justice was about to be served with military precision. At 6 a.m. sharp, FBI agents surrounded Morrison's house while he slept off another night of heavy drinking at O'Malley's pub. Agent Sarah Mitchell had coordinated the multi-location operation with military precision, executing simultaneous arrests and evidence seizures across the city. Federal agents, Derek Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law and conspiracy to commit murder. Morrison stumbled to his front door in boxers and a stained T-shirt, his bloodshot eyes struggling to focus on the badges and weapons surrounding him. The man who had terrorized civilians with his authority now faced the full power of federal law enforcement.
Across town, Captain Sullivan's door exploded inward as FBI agents executed their search warrant. Captain Sullivan, who had spent 30 years perfecting the art of protecting corrupt officers, watched helplessly as agents seized computers, files, and financial records that would expose decades of systematic corruption.
Captain Richard Sullivan, you're under arrest for conspiracy, civil rights violations, and racketeering under the RICO statute, Agent Mitchell announced as handcuffs clicked around Sullivan's wrists. The evidence Tony's team had methodically gathered formed the foundation of an unprecedented federal case. Morrison faced charges for Isabella's assault, conspiracy to commit murder, and civil rights violations. Sullivan confronted RICO charges for operating the corruption network that had protected bad officers while enriching themselves through drug dealer payoffs. Chief Hayes received the call about the arrests while preparing for his morning press conference. His carefully planned statement about departmental reforms became irrelevant as reporters began asking about federal racketeering charges against his command staff. "Chief Hayes, did you know that Captain Sullivan was receiving payments from drug dealers?" shouted a reporter from Channel 7 News. "Were you aware that Officer Morrison was planning to murder Dr. Rodriguez?" added another journalist. Hayes's political survival instincts kicked in immediately. By noon, he had announced Sullivan's termination, Morrison's dismissal from the force, and the appointment of a federal monitor to oversee departmental operations. Lisa Chen monitored these developments from her digital command center, tracking how quickly institutional protection evaporated when federal charges threatened personal freedom. "Sullivan's lawyer is already requesting plea negotiations," Chen reported to Tony's team. "Morrison's attorney is suggesting mental health defenses. The corruption network is collapsing as everyone tries to save themselves." The federal intervention created new dynamics throughout the police department. Officers who had remained silent about corruption began approaching Detective Thompson with information about other incidents they had witnessed. "It's like a dam breaking," Thompson explained during his debriefing with Agent Mitchell. 20 years of suppressed conscience suddenly finding voice because people finally believe they'll be protected for telling the truth. Officer Santos found herself elevated from departmental pariah to federal witness, her courage in coming forward now recognized as the catalyst that had broken the conspiracy of silence. "You saved lives by testifying," Agent Mitchell told Santos during a witness protection briefing. Morrison's communications show he was planning to target other minority families who had filed complaints against officers. The investigation expanded beyond Tony's original scope as federal agents uncovered evidence of corruption involving 12 officers, 4 supervisors, and connections to organized crime that reached into city government. Attorney Carmen Valdez found herself coordinating with federal prosecutors on a case that had grown from individual police brutality to systematic racketeering. "We're not just getting justice for Isabella," she told Tony during their strategy session. "We're dismantling a criminal organization that operated with badges." Morrison's arrest video leaked to social media within hours showed a broken man crying as federal agents led him away in handcuffs. The contrast with his arrogant assault on Isabella couldn't have been more stark. The badge that had made him feel untouchable now meant nothing against federal civil rights charges. The community response was immediate and powerful. Protesters who had demanded Morrison's arrest now gathered to thank the officers like Santos, who had risked their careers to expose corruption. Isabella, despite her injuries, spoke at a rally supporting police reform. "True justice requires good officers to speak out against bad ones," Isabella told the crowd, her voice still carrying the authority of someone who had faced violence and survived. Officer Santos showed more courage in one moment of truth than Morrison showed in 15 years of hiding behind his badge. The federal intervention accelerated when grand jury proceedings began for both Morrison and Sullivan. The evidence packages Tony's team had assembled provided prosecutors with surveillance footage, financial records, recorded conversations, and witness testimony that made conviction virtually certain. Morrison's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal, but federal prosecutors, armed with evidence of planned murder, had no interest in reducing charges. Sullivan's attorney requested psychiatric evaluation, claiming the stress of exposure had triggered mental health issues. Classic deflection tactics, Agent Mitchell observed. When corruption is exposed, perpetrators always claim they are victims of circumstances beyond their control. Tony watched these developments with professional satisfaction. The methodical pressure his team had applied had achieved exactly the intended result: complete exposure and accountability for systematic police corruption. But the personal cost remained significant. Isabella continued recovering from physical injuries while processing the trauma of nearly being murdered by someone sworn to protect her. Tony balanced his satisfaction at achieving justice with concern for his wife's healing process. "We won," Isabella told Tony as they watched news coverage of Morrison's perp walk. "But I keep thinking about all the other victims who didn't have a husband with your resources and connections." Tony nodded, understanding that individual justice was meaningless without systematic change. The federal intervention had begun that process, but lasting reform would require sustained effort beyond any single case. The war for accountability was entering its final phase, with federal courts preparing to deliver justice that local institutions had refused to provide. The federal courthouse buzzed with media attention as Morrison's trial began 6 months after his arrest. Protesters lined the sidewalks holding signs reading "Justice for Dr. Rodriguez" and "End Police Immunity," while Morrison's few remaining supporters gathered in smaller numbers near the defendant's entrance.
Inside the courtroom, federal prosecutor Amanda Chen, no relation to Lisa Chen, outlined a case that would redefine how civil rights violations were prosecuted. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Prosecutor Chen began, "this case is about a corrupt police officer who believed his badge gave him the right to assault innocent citizens based on their race, and then conspire to murder the victim when she sought justice." The evidence presentation was methodical and overwhelming. Security footage from the hospital showed Morrison conducting surveillance on Isabella in preparation for his planned attack. Enhanced audio from Aiden Park's video captured Morrison's racial slurs during the assault. Financial records demonstrated Sullivan's corruption network that had protected Morrison for years. Isabella's testimony formed the emotional centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Taking the stand in her physician's coat, she described the assault with clinical precision while conveying the personal trauma of being attacked by someone sworn to protect her. "I announced every action I took," Isabella testified, her voice steady despite visible emotion. "I explained that I was reaching for my medical bag to provide identification. Officer Morrison told me to know my place and that people like me didn't belong in that neighborhood. Then he began hitting me with his baton while shouting racial slurs." Defense attorney David Stern's cross-examination attempted to portray Morrison as a dedicated officer who had made a split-second decision under stressful circumstances. "Dr. Rodriguez, isn't it true that you were agitated during the traffic stop?" Stern asked. "I was concerned," Isabella replied calmly. "Any reasonable person would be concerned when pulled over by an aggressive officer for a minor equipment violation. But you admit you were reaching into your vehicle for an object." "I was reaching for my medical bag to provide identification, as I clearly announced to Officer Morrison." Stern's strategy backfired when Isabella's medical expertise allowed her to systematically refute his suggestions about the circumstances of her assault. Officer Santos's testimony proved devastating to Morrison's defense. Her first-hand account of witnessing the assault and subsequent intimidation efforts demolished any remaining credibility for Morrison's version of events. Officer Morrison told me afterward that Dr. Rodriguez needed to learn her place, Santos testified. Captain Sullivan later ordered me to change my report to support Morrison's false narrative about justified use of force. Detective Thompson provided testimony about systematic evidence tampering that had protected Morrison and other corrupt officers for years. His documentation of altered reports and suppressed investigations revealed the scope of institutional corruption. The defense case collapsed when Morrison's recorded conversations planning Isabella's murder were played for the jury. The audio captured Morrison discussing problem resolution with chilling casualness. Rodriguez needs to have an accident, something that looks natural. Morrison's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Prosecutor Chen let the recording speak for itself before addressing the jury. Those are the words of a man who believed his badge made him judge, jury, and executioner. The evidence shows Officer Morrison didn't just assault Isabella, he planned to murder her to prevent accountability. Morrison's attorney attempted character witnesses, but the prosecution's rebuttal included testimony from 3 previous victims who described similar patterns of racial profiling and excessive force. Maria Santos, a nurse from the East Side, testified about Morrison breaking her teenage son's arm during an arrest for jaywalking. "He called my boy an animal and said he was teaching him respect for authority," she said through tears. James Williams, a college professor, described being pepper-sprayed by Morrison during a traffic stop for failure to immediately comply when asked for license and registration. "I was reaching for my wallet, just like Dr. Rodriguez. The only difference is that someone filmed her assault." The pattern evidence was overwhelming. Morrison hadn't just attacked Isabella, he had terrorized the minority community for years while being protected by systematic departmental corruption. Sullivan's separate trial proceeded simultaneously, with Lisa Chen's financial analysis revealing the scope of his corruption network. Bank records showed $300,000 in payments from drug dealers in exchange for protection from police raids and investigations. Captain Sullivan operated a criminal enterprise within the police department. He collected bribes, protected corrupt officers, and intimidated honest cops who threatened his operation. The evidence against Sullivan was equally damning. Recorded conversations showed him coordinating with drug dealers, threatening officers who questioned departmental practices, and orchestrating cover-ups of misconduct complaints. Officer Santos's testimony about Sullivan's retaliation efforts when she refused to sign the false report about Morrison's assault said he told her she could revise her statement or find a new career. He made it clear that honesty wasn't welcome in his department. As both trials neared conclusion, the broader impact became clear. Federal oversight of the Metro Police Department had already begun, with new training protocols, accountability measures, and civilian oversight replacing the culture of impunity that had protected officers like Morrison. Community leaders who had demanded justice watched from the gallery as years of frustration finally received validation through federal prosecution. The trials represented more than individual accountability. They demonstrated that systematic police corruption could be exposed and prosecuted when victims had adequate resources and legal representation.
Tony observed the proceedings with quiet satisfaction, knowing that his methodical approach had achieved something beyond personal justice. The evidence his team had gathered was creating precedents that would protect future victims of police misconduct. The jury deliberations would determine individual guilt, but the broader victory had already been achieved through systemic exposure of corruption and the courage of officers like Santos, who chose truth over institutional loyalty. The federal courthouse fell silent as Judge Patricia Valdez, no relation to attorney Carmen Valdez, prepared to read Morrison's verdict after 18 hours of jury deliberation. Morrison sat rigid beside his attorney, the confident swagger he had once displayed completely absent. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Valdez asked. The jury foreman, a retired teacher who had reminded several observers of Barbara Whitman from the original story, stood with obvious gravity. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of assault under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty." Isabella gripped Tony's hand as each guilty verdict echoed through the courtroom. Morrison's shoulders sagged with each pronouncement, the reality of federal prison finally penetrating his delusions of protection. 2 weeks later, Sullivan's jury delivered equally devastating verdicts on all RICO charges, conspiracy counts, and civil rights violations. The corruption network that had protected bad officers for decades was officially declared a criminal enterprise under federal law. Judge Valdez scheduled sentencing for both defendants on the same day, creating a moment of accountability that the local system had never provided. "Derek Morrison," Judge Valdez began during sentencing, "you violated your oath as a police officer, terrorized innocent citizens based on their race, and planned to commit murder to avoid accountability. The court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison without possibility of parole." Morrison's mother sobbed in the gallery while Isabella watched with grim satisfaction. 18 years wouldn't return the sense of safety Morrison had stolen from her, but it would prevent him from victimizing others. Sullivan received 12 years for operating the corruption network, his 30 decades of service counting for nothing against the systematic betrayal of public trust. The civil trial proceeded simultaneously, with Carmen Valdez securing a landmark $15 million settlement against the city and police department. The financial impact forced institutional changes that criminal convictions alone couldn't achieve. This settlement establishes several important precedents, Valdez explained during the press conference announcing the agreement. Departments can no longer claim ignorance of systematic misconduct when supervisors actively enable corruption. Financial accountability will force institutional reform. The settlement funding established the Rodriguez Foundation for Police Accountability, with Isabella serving as executive director and Tony as chairman of the board. Their mission expanded beyond individual cases to systemic reform of police training, oversight, and accountability measures. Officer Santos received promotion to detective and assignment to the newly created Internal Affairs Reform Division, where her courage in exposing corruption made her a natural leader for cultural change within the department. Detective Thompson was appointed as liaison to the federal monitoring team overseeing departmental reforms. His documentation of evidence tampering became the foundation for new evidence handling protocols. Chief Hayes' resignation was announced quietly on a Friday afternoon, his political survival instincts finally recognizing that federal oversight made his position untenable. The new chief, appointed jointly by the mayor and federal monitors, came from outside the department with a mandate for comprehensive reform. The Metro Police Department operated under federal consent decree, requiring extensive changes: mandatory body cameras for all officers, civilian oversight board with subpoena power, new training protocols emphasizing de-escalation, and whistleblower protections for officers reporting misconduct. Aiden Park, whose courage in filming Morrison's assault had provided crucial evidence, received a scholarship from the Rodriguez Foundation for his college education. His video had become a training tool used in police academies nationwide, demonstrating the importance of citizen documentation of police encounters. Tony's network of former military personnel evolved into a consulting firm specializing in police accountability investigations. Their methodical approach to evidence gathering and strategic pressure had proven effective in exposing corruption that traditional oversight had failed to address. Lisa Chen established a cybersecurity firm focused on transparency and accountability in law enforcement, her digital warfare expertise helping other communities document police misconduct and corruption. 6 months after the verdicts, Isabella returned to full-time medical practice with renewed purpose. Her experience as a victim of police violence gave her unique insights when treating other victims of assault and abuse. "Every patient who comes through these doors deserves the same protection and justice we fought for," Isabella told Tony during one of their evening walks around their neighborhood. "The foundation work is important, but healing people one at a time is still my calling." The documentary Code of Silence, The Rodriguez Case, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, bringing national attention to systematic police corruption and the importance of accountability measures. The film followed Tony's methodical approach to justice while highlighting the courage of officers like Santos, who chose truth over institutional loyalty.
Morrison began serving his sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania, where his status as a former police officer required protective custody. Sullivan was housed at a different facility in Ohio, their network permanently dismantled. The broader impact extended beyond Metro City as other communities used the Rodriguez case as a template for challenging police misconduct. Federal prosecutors cited the precedents established by Morrison's conviction in subsequent civil rights cases across the country. Tony reflected on the year-long battle during the Foundation's first annual gala, honoring officers and citizens who had shown courage in pursuing accountability. The systematic approach his team had used proved that institutional corruption could be exposed and defeated when faced with equal organization and unwavering commitment to justice. Individual cases matter, Tony told the assembled crowd of reformers, victims' families, and honest police officers. But lasting change requires institutional transformation. We didn't just get justice for Isabella, we created a model for communities everywhere to demand accountability from those sworn to protect them. The war for police accountability had achieved a crucial victory, but Tony understood that vigilance would be required to maintain the reforms they had fought to establish. The price of justice, like freedom, was eternal watchfulness. 18 months after Morrison's conviction, Tony Rodriguez stood before a packed auditorium at the National Police Accountability Conference, his dress uniform replaced by a simple business suit that reflected his transition from warrior to reformer. "Justice isn't a destination," Tony began, his voice carrying the authority earned through combat and struggle. "It's a process that requires constant vigilance and unwavering commitment to truth." The audience included police chiefs, civil rights attorneys, federal monitors, and victims' families from across the country, all connected by the shared mission of transforming law enforcement accountability. Isabella sat in the front row, her recovery complete, but her commitment to reform stronger than ever. The Rodriguez Foundation had expanded to 15 cities, providing legal resources and strategic support for communities fighting police misconduct. "We've received over 400 requests for assistance this year," Isabella reported during her presentation on victim advocacy. "Each case represents a family whose life has been shattered by those sworn to protect them. Our mission is ensuring they don't face that battle alone." The Foundation's success stories were mounting. In Chicago, their cybersecurity team had uncovered a corruption network involving 12 officers. In Phoenix, their legal strategy had forced the resignation of a police chief who had covered up misconduct for years. In Atlanta, their training protocols were being implemented department-wide under federal consent decree. Officer Santos, now Detective Santos, addressed the conference about internal reform efforts. Her courage in exposing Morrison had inspired dozens of officers nationwide to report misconduct they had previously ignored. "Change comes from within," Santos explained to the assembled law enforcement officials, "but it requires protecting those who choose conscience over convenience." Whistleblower protections aren't just policy recommendations, they're essential for cultural transformation. The Metro Police Department itself had become a model for reform under federal oversight. Use of force incidents had dropped by 60%, civilian complaints were down 40%, and community trust surveys showed dramatic improvement in police-citizen relations. Chief Maria Gonzalez, who had replaced Hayes after his resignation, credited the Rodriguez case with creating momentum for comprehensive change. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to force necessary evolution," she told conference attendees. "Our department is stronger because we were forced to confront our failures." Aiden Park, now a sophomore at Georgetown University studying criminal justice, spoke about the next generation's role in police accountability. His video of Morrison's assault inspired hundreds of young people to document police encounters and advocate for reform. Technology is democratizing accountability, Aiden explained. Every smartphone is a potential check on abuse of power, but documentation must be coupled with strategic action to create lasting change. Lisa Chen's cybersecurity firm had evolved into a national resource for transparency advocates, providing technical assistance for communities seeking to expose corruption. Her methodical approach to digital investigation had been adopted by federal agencies investigating police misconduct. Captain Washington continued coordinating the Foundation's rapid response team, deploying to communities facing crisis situations involving police violence. His military logistics expertise ensured that resources reached victims quickly and effectively. The documentary about their case had won an Emmy Award for investigative journalism, bringing sustained national attention to systematic police accountability issues. Morrison's case was now taught in law schools as a precedent for federal civil rights prosecution.
Tony's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen Valdez, who was arguing another police misconduct case before the Supreme Court. Rodriguez president cited in oral arguments today, "Your methodical approach is changing federal law." The personal costs remained significant. Isabella continued experiencing anxiety during traffic stops, and Tony struggled with hypervigilance that made civilian life challenging. But both had found purpose in transforming their trauma into advocacy for others. "Healing isn't forgetting," Isabella told a support group for police violence survivors. "It's channeling pain into action that prevents others from experiencing what we endured." Morrison was serving his sentence in protective custody, his appeals exhausted, and his name permanently associated with police corruption. Sullivan had been released to a halfway house after serving 8 years, his pension forfeited, and his law enforcement credentials permanently revoked. The broader impact extended beyond criminal justice to military veteran advocacy. Tony's network had demonstrated how service members' skills could be redirected toward domestic social justice, inspiring similar organizations focused on veterans' civic engagement. As the conference concluded, Tony reflected on the year-long battle that had transformed from personal crisis into national movement. The systematic approach his team had used proved that institutional power could be challenged successfully when confronted with equal organization and unwavering commitment to truth. "We didn't just get justice for Isabella," Tony told the closing session. "We proved that accountability is possible when communities refuse to accept impunity as normal. Every family deserves the protection we fought to achieve." The Rodriguez Foundation continued expanding, its methodical approach to justice becoming a template for communities nationwide. Morrison's assault on Isabella had intended to silence a victim and protect corruption. Instead, it had sparked a movement that was transforming American policing one case at a time. Justice, as Tony had learned, required both precision and persistence. But when applied with military discipline and unwavering moral clarity, it could overcome even the most entrenched institutional corruption. The mission continued, and victory was measured not in individual convictions, but in systematic change that protected all citizens equally under law. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.